Good evening and welcome to the March 23rd, 2022 Planning and Zoning Commission for the City of Cedar Falls. We'll call the meeting to order and roll call vote by Karen.
Good evening. Kristen?
Here.
Sorry, we'll get the microphone over here a little bit. Oops. Hartley?
Here.
Holst?
Here.
Larson?
Here.
Leeper?
Here.
Lynch? Here. Moser? Here. Saul?
Here.
All right, we have a quorum. Thank you, Karen. I would entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes of March 9th meeting.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, with that, we'll go on to the public comments section of the meeting. This is the time if anyone has public comments not related to an agenda item, you can come up and speak to that item. If you give your name and address, please.
I'm Andrew Schroll. I'm at 930 Newman Avenue. I'm currently serving as the chair of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the committee regarding the updated bicycle network plan. We're excited to be at this point in maturity of the plan to present it to the Planning and Zoning Commission for your feedback. This plan is the result of substantial work put together from city staff, the committee, and public input. As a committee, our mission is to improve the quality of life through safe biking and walking. The more connected our biking and walking physically are, the more connected we are as a community. In the plan, there's an emphasis on increasing the utility of the network on top of our fantastic recreational trail system. When you hear the terms utility or commuting focus, it doesn't mean just commuting to work or school. It means going to a friend's house, running an errand, or biking to a park rather than driving there. The terms commuting and utility of the network are then synonymous with simply getting around town. In fact, the original 2009 plan focused on connectivity between neighborhoods and destination areas. This major refresh continues that effort, updating the actionable steps that the city can take. We aimed to be practical, aligning with development projects as Cedar Falls grows, and filling in missing parts of the network in existing areas. Safety is always top of mind. Continuity of the network and intersection improvements are two of the biggest ways to improve safety and remove barriers to entry for riders of various skill levels. One way I think about this is reducing the number of transitions required to get from A to B, such as switching to the road because a trail runs out. We want riders of all ages to feel like they can navigate around town safely and easily on a bike. The goal is to further increase community participation in utilizing this resource. We worked hard to represent the needs of the community of bikers as much as possible while considering practical trade-offs. We hope that this network is viewed as fitting well with city planning and for bikeability and walkability, as well as broader plans such as the Black Hawk County MPO Pedestrian Master Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. If you could stay up for a minute. I don't know if anyone has any questions for Andrew. It's a little unorthodox. Can we do that, Karen?
Well, we have a whole presentation here on the bike.
Oh, so that's going to be
coming up.
separate.
That's on our...
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
That's on our agenda, so this is a very nice introduction to the presentation.
Great, Andrew. I thought you were the next item.
And I'm happy to take any questions anytime during this meeting or after.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you for your work. All right, with that, our next public comment item is on the Cedar Falls Bicycle Plan update.
Okay, so thank you, commissioners, for having us and letting us come and present this. It's been a fairly long and long effort for us on this. So just wanted to begin with praise for the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. We really appreciate the work that they put in on this. This was in conjunction between us and them, between staff and the committee. They bore with us through the pandemic and provided ample insight to help us refine this product to bring forward today. So Why are we updating the plan? Well, let's talk a little bit about the function of the plan. It functions as a guiding document for infrastructure planning and is considered in the planning process when streets in the city are slated to be developed, reconstructed, or otherwise maintained. This ensures that opportunities for improving the network are not missed at the point when improvements make the most sense. So the impetus for this update is fourfold. First, there is a lot of love in the community for our bike network, both for commuting utility and for the enjoyment of trails through our nature areas. This pride for the bike network has shown through the entire process we and the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee went through to develop this latest iteration of the plan. Second, it is very important that we keep this plan relevant as a decision-making tool. Third, as you'll see in the next slides, it is a regular review of the bike network, such as looking at what's working, what's not, what can be improved. All of this keeps us as city staff tuned into what the public would like these aspects of Cedar Falls to look like. And finally, our city council asked during goal setting in 2019 that this effort be undertaken.
My name is Matt Tolan. I'm one of the staff engineers. Just going over a little bit of the history of this. So the city has had previous iterations of this plan from 2009 to 2015. And then with Intercog in 2018, there was a 2045 plan established as the MPO bikeway plan that coordinates a larger network of both between Cedar Falls and Waterloo and the surrounding community. And so this would be the next iteration, is our 2022 preliminary bike network plan that's in front of you today. With that, as Chris has been cycling through, the big iterations over time as the city develops, we're taking inventory of where we've been, what we've built, and where we're going to be going. So these plans are used on that planning level to not only show what's been built, but where maybe some of the missing connections are, where we're going, and to what to look forward to in the future.
Okay, now let's look at the parameters that we kind of began this project with. The goal that the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee chose to prioritize on this had to do with the daily utility of the network, for things like commuting and otherwise, while also continuing to enhance the already excellent recreational aspects of the network. Due to complications and costs, we would not consider widening of streets or rights of way. Another point is staff provided the committee with an array of design options for our most common street widths. So, something different will fit on a 40-foot wide street versus something that would fit on a 28-foot wide street. And we'll touch on this somewhat on the next slide. Putting in bike lanes instead of currently existing on-street parking can be considered. However, prior to such a change, it would require a public process involving notification of adjacent property owners and a vote or approval by City Council. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee would be responsible for conducting the public process along the street route where it is proposed on the plan. While bikes are allowed on sidewalks, sidewalks were not considered bike infrastructure for the purposes of this plan. For reference, sidewalks are less than 6 feet wide. Multi-use trails are 6 to 10 feet wide, and for safety reasons are generally only placed along street frontages with limited driveways and or cross streets. Multi-use trails through parks and greenway corridors have few interruptions from traffic and are highly valued in the community, but may not be in convenient locations for people commuting to work or school by bicycle. And then finally, along streets where more driveways and or cross streets are present, on-street infrastructure tends to be safer where motorists are more likely to see cyclists.
expanding a little bit off of what Chris had mentioned, when we look at these different corridors throughout our community, there's a lot that we need to take in from what's currently there in the existing corridor, looking at the vehicular travel lanes. Is there a drop lane that we need for left or right turning movement? The width of the roadway that varies throughout our community. Looking at our curb and gutter sections, looking at the storm sewer infrastructure that's there. Is there going to be a grate that's going to be in a potential hazard zone for a cyclist? Looking at that type of grate options that are there. Do we need to move a bicycle facility away from that curb and gutter zone? Looking at parking's a big one. Adjacent to the edge of curb, looking at, if a car door is going to be parked and the door opens, is that going to be a conflict point? If we do establish a set bike lane. Taking a look at also, is this a corridor that we may have better utility if it's off-street accommodations? Are we looking at behind neighborhoods? Are we cutting through areas where vehicular traffic necessarily doesn't go, but it'd be a good spot along creeks or channels? And then looking at, widths of the roadway, specifically looking at, a 5-foot bike lane on our streets through there if that accommodation could be made. Some considerations that Chris had mentioned, always with our right-of-ways, looking at, is the facility that's proposed going to cause a right-of-way acquisition? There are some concerns when it comes to that, so especially with costs. When we reconstruct a road, there's varying different places that we have money come in that go to certain projects that may not allow for a widening of a roadway, only reconstruction. So there's some cost benefits that we're always looking at as well.
I want to talk a little bit about the methodology that we went through to develop this plan. It went through several iterations with an initial map as a starting point for discussion that staff had developed. This map conservatively represented what staff determined to be the most likely to be built out based on parameters that we just discussed. Now, with that map, the committee provided their analysis and proposed changes to the map. They actually put in a lot of thought in that iteration, as we recall. And with their input, staff was able to develop another version of the map, map number 2, which was developed for the purpose of presenting to the public and getting public feedback. So in that process, a public outreach questionnaire was created and refined through internal staff discussions and discussions with the committee. And then public outreach events along with the public feedback questionnaire was provided so the public could give feedback on the plan, on plan map number 2. After we received those responses back, staff synthesized and analyzed the data from the questionnaire responses and identified the most prominent requests and recommendations provided by respondents. So plan map version number 3 is what we're looking at today. So in response to the public input, staff refined the map with several routes and notes that were reflective of all input and feedback received up to that point. This map was presented to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee on February 1st, 2022, where they voted unanimously to recommend that the plan be brought forward for consideration and adoption.
Another thing we wanted to highlight is kind of our engineering timelines internally with the council approval process and our internal design with our engineering staff. The emphasis of this slide is to show that it's about a 2-year process to go from an approved design or go from approval from a council standpoint into design and then implementation from a construction standpoint. We're always looking at, for example, this fall of 2022, we'll be presenting the 5-year plan back to council for approval of 2024 pavement. So that's why these documents for planning purposes are so critical to help us lay out, where we need to be and use that as a planning tool to incorporate with those long-range plans.
Okay, for public outreach, the events were advertised through Channel 15. And this happened back in September of 2021, just for reference. Through Channel 15, flyers, posters, press release in the Courier, and social media outlets. Those events were held at the farmers market and the public library. And the questionnaire was open for 3 weeks and garnered 430 responses. So, pretty decent response from the community. What's even more impressive is that much of these were open response questions on the questionnaire. And these are examples of what we asked about: unsafe areas or routes, connectivity issues, practical problems and potential practical solutions, factors that discourage biking, factors that encourage biking. Most people took their time and gave a lot of thought to the direction they were giving us. No response was taken lightly through this process. To give an idea about the profile of respondents, most were residents of Cedar Falls, but about 17% were from areas adjacent to us. Almost half were above the age of 40, and the vast majority were above the age of 25. So here are the following slides will be some tidbits from our non-open response questions. We had a good mix of users, though most identified themselves as recreational bicyclists. And a pretty good array of people across this, a lot of them being automobile commuters as well. So almost 90% said they would use a trail if it was between their home and their most common destinations. 63% said they would use a bike lane if it was between their home and their most common destinations. So with those two and another question we had asked, which they prefer more, there is a clear preference for trails over bike lanes from our questionnaire responses, as 87% preferred trails over bike lanes. Looking at the plan, you'll notice more trails than bike lanes, and that is on purpose. I just wanted to point that out. And lastly, this was just a very interesting statistic here. Well, not a statistic because it wasn't a statistical survey, I'll put it that way. But it was 17% of respondents said they could make do without a car, which shows we're doing a pretty good job of accommodating that possibility for some people, but there's obviously a lot of room for improvement in that regard. So this is a good segue into some areas that were added to the map since the last iteration of the map. These are the areas of public interest that came through the questionnaire. East-west connectivity between Hudson and Maine, either on 1st or 2nd Street, was a big concern that people brought up. Many respondents had mentioned that. I'm not going to go through these because we'll go through some other slides explaining these in more detail that Matt's going to cover. But I did want to mention that each of these had several respondents, anywhere from 10 to 20 people at least that or more that had mentioned these as pain points for them in terms of connectivity throughout the network.
All right, as Chris mentioned, we're going to kind of dive into some of those specific areas. But first, before we start, just wanted to talk about how you read the bicycle plan network. Anything that's shown on the map that is in a solid line is already placed. Anything that is dashed is future proposed. Red would be a recreational multi-use trail. Blue would be a bike lane. That'd be a dedicated bike lane like what we have on Clay Street already in the community. Light green, or the neon green, is prepared sharrows or shared lane markings throughout the community that we have on, for example, 4th Street. And then dark green would be paved shoulders. That would be a extension of the roadway surface outside of the vehicular travel lane. These are more commonly used in rural applications. Diving into the first location of public interest was the corridor between Hudson Road and Franklin, or otherwise otherwise known as Center Street. Looking at the connection, providing the east-west connectivity through the corridor with the West First Street is Highway 57. With that project, there was sidewalk infill where pedestrian accommodations were made along that corridor. But from a biking standpoint, the recommendation or public input was to provide a better network to get to that downtown district or over between the trails on Hudson over to the gridded network, which is more the downtown area, or into Center Street. Second Street happens to be a wider street. It's approximately 40 feet wide currently. And we would just recommend in the future looking at placing kind of a combination between the bike lanes and the more of the residential area, and then sharrows as we get into a little bit more of the constricted zone downtown. Next area is Hudson Road. Looking specifically at the University to Ridgeway, but also looking at the existing network that's also north of there all the way up to First Street. Just looking at connectivity and connecting. Currently, there is some gaps along Hudson Road, especially as we go more south in the community. This would be south of UNI. Just looking at making the connections to other trail networks on Green Hill and then our Prairie Lakes area to the south, and then eventually Viking Road that we'll be doing next year. But just looking at addressing adding trail in those areas, but then also near 18th Street, kind of near UNI's track, there is kind of an abrupt stop to the trail system. So over time, looking at providing more consistent trails through that corridor as that corridor develops in the future. The next area of public interest was University Avenue, specifically on the very west end of town, kind of out by Barn Happy, looking at connectivity. We have a great kind of loop right now between First Street, Union, and 12th. We're currently in the establishment of the 12th to Union to 27th loop. And right now we do have plans to add trail along Union Road down to University Avenue. So kind of the next iteration of University would be providing accommodation along University to make the third loop. We did add a note in this. As the corridor sits currently, it's a rural cross section. So we have ditches on either side. And there's not much utilities out there currently, but as that corridor develops in the future and expands, we did add a note to, if there's availability to add trail with development, to add that and make a third loop with full trail. Round Street and kind of the Pinnacle Prairie Master Plan area. So this would be on Viking Road to the east of what would be Menards. Currently out to where kind of Cedar Heights Drive construction limits are right now. In this area, looking at street connectivity, looking at connectivity within some of the areas that are missing or will be developed in the future. With the Cedar Heights Drive reconstruction project, there will be trail installed from Green Hill Road through Huntington and down to the existing Viking Road roundabout, and then pursuing that connectivity along Viking Road with developments to the west and north as well, also to Round and the adjacent side streets there, and then eventually Cedar Heights, which is our next slide. So this is on the MPO plan. We did talk with the city of Waterloo about this as well. But looking at kind of the connectivity, the next branch of connectivity to Waterloo, but also one of the larger manufacturers and in the area, John Deere, making that connectivity to their employees as well. Same thing with University Avenue. It is a rural cross section right now. So we are proposing the paved shoulders with the potential of, as that corridor develops in the future, adding trail there and eventually having some connectivity with Waterloo in the future as it's shown in the 2045 MPO plan. So that's kind of what we've already taken from public comment, incorporated in the maps. Now I'm going to take some time to talk about, what physically is being built right now and where we're going over the next kind of 5 years. So kind of what to expect, that's also in our plan kind of for 2022 is industrial park expansion. So west of the current Target Distribution Center, There's a 200-acre parcel that the city annexed in. Construction's actually starting on Monday, but there will be a sidewalk system that's installed with that in conjunction with next year's project with Viking Road. I'll talk about in a minute. But the new industrial park will have pedestrian and a bike facility through the industrial park with the accommodations of the new recreational pond on the north end. Union Road Trail reconstruction, that project will wrap up this year. That is from 12th to 27th Street. That is on the east side of the roadway, and that will be what was the second loop I discussed earlier for that to move forward. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Cedar Heights Drive reconstruction. There will be trail installed along the west side of Cedar Heights Drive from Green Hill Road all the way down to the existing Viking roundabout. In 2023, Main Street reconstruction will start. It's a 3-year project. Council approved that with bike lanes along the corridor, with the intersection improvements at 6th, 12th, 18th, and Searly. So those improvements will be installed with that reconstruction project over those 3 years, starting in 2023. Ridgeway Avenue reconstruction. This is actually, it's kind of hard to tell. It's in the upper left picture, but this would be the space in front of Quickstar that's on Ridgeway. There's currently a gap between Nordic Drive and Highway 58. The DOT is planning on rebuilding that. And with that project, the city will address the signal at Nordic and then have the sidewalk infill along the north side of Ridgeway to make that connection between the existing Ridgeway Trail on the west to the existing trail on the east side of 58. And then lastly, Viking Road. This will be a big project for the city. This will connect from Prairie Lakes at Hudson Road going west towards the new industrial park. So we'll have connectivity through the new industrial park on the north side of the industrial park connection there. And then eventually leading up to, in the future, also a connection that won't be incorporated in next year's work, but eventually Production Drive, looking at having a trail there just to provide those amenities for those who work in that area. 2024, Creekside Technology Center. This one probably isn't on a whole lot of people's radar, but this is south of Ridgeway, where there's a Holiday Inn out there currently, either side of Hudson. As that commercial park develops, there's plans to have trail accommodations in there, just like the industrial park, for the individuals that would work in that business center. Aldrich Elementary connections would be the second project. That's what's planned in the CIP currently. That would be making connections, roadway network connections from the east, from Hudson, and then also to the north up to kind of the existing trail along Green Hill Road extension. And that's a multi-year project as well, but that potentially could kick off at that time. Union Road Phase 1. This was the third loop that I had mentioned earlier. This is from 27th down to University. This involves a complete reconstruction of that roadway, and then a trail would be installed along the east side along with some culvert improvements. And then kind of looking into the crystal ball, but in the CIP now for 2025 and above, some of the other areas we want to highlight were Grand Boulevard Trail infill. This is a section of trail where Grand kind of ends. It used to be kind of a trolley path through there. Currently, it's just kind of a green space. Some recreationalists still use that kind of through there. We want to kind of establish that between pavements. And then lastly, the Highway 58 in Green Hill. This one is still ongoing discussions with the DOT, but as Highway 58 and Green Hill intersections are improved, looking at making a better trail accommodation and connection across that corridor so we can bridge the east and west sides.
Okay, so we only covered just a few items that are on the plan. The plan is in front of you, so you can take a look at it as we're talking, or if you have any questions. I did want to go over kind of where we are in the process here. We do intend on this being an opportunity for discussion and public comment, and then we'll bring it back at the next meeting for for consideration and vote. And after that, we'll take it to a committee of the whole meeting, which could potentially take place in April. I believe the second meeting in April, and it would go before City Council officially in May for their vote and adoption. So, so as I said at the time, we're bringing this forward for discussion and public comments.
All right, thank you, everyone, for some really hard work there over a significant period of time, so thank you. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to the item or comment? Name and address, please.
Daryl Cruz, 2725 Minnetonka Drive. Just some comments on the east-west connection between Hudson and Main on 12th and 18th Street. Those appear to share the road, and looking at the map, I could see an opportunity there for possibly 17th Street, which parallels 18th for a majority of the crossing from Hudson to Main, and as well as 11th. I speak from the vantage point of doing over 30 RAGBRAIs. I biked across the United States twice. I've got a couple hundred miles on a bike, and a big vehicle won't see you many times, even though you have blinky lights and all kinds of reflectors and all kinds of stuff like that. There's an opportunity here to put a little more safety in this little section right here, which is going to have a lot of traffic, especially at 5 o'clock. If somebody's commuting home in a vehicle, they'll be commuting in a bicycle, and you could have collisions there. And a collision with a bicycle and a car, it doesn't matter who's at fault, the bicycle loses, pretty much. So that's my biggest thing right there when I look at this. Otherwise, everything looks fantastic. But staying off the main thoroughfares is really important. So,
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. Is there anyone else that has comments? Name and address, please.
I'm Kathy Green, and I live at 1911 Timber Drive. Mostly, I just want to thank you all for all the work you've done, and all the city employees and the bicycle committee. This has been great. You've done so many good things. I think especially the roundabouts on University make it so much easier for people on foot or bicycles to get across to the south or north of that corridor. It's a wonderful plan. Two things. One is I have somebody that works for the city told me how to trigger the street lights so that a bicycle will trigger the lights, because you can sit at a bike at Searly or some of the few lights we have left forever. And if there are no cars come along, you don't get across. So if there's something that can be done about that, so we bicyclists will trigger the lights to turn green. And the other, I think, the main problem is human. A human problem. I think about every week I have a close call with distracted drivers, people just not paying attention, and very often people who don't want me on the street even will roll down their window and yell at me to get off the street. We've got a lot of that in Cedar Falls. And I'm one of the 17% that could live without my bike. I commute everywhere, all over town, and find it very easy to get places. But the human element, I'm not sure what you can do about, but education or something. But thank you all.
Thank you. Any other comments from public? Any comments from the commission?
Well, I will say that as an advocate on the Cedar Trails Partnership, and I know all the hard work that we do recreationally, we have an amazing trail system here in the Cedar Valley. We are very lucky to have over 100+ miles worth of trail, and I just want to say thank you for the robustness of this plan. It's exciting to see. It's exciting to see opportunities for growth and development as we continue to grow as a city. and as an advocate for someone that loves the trails and loves spending time on them with my family, I'm looking forward to seeing what will become in the future.
I would second that, but I also have a question. In looking at your 5-year plan or the 2022, 23, other, some of it is new, and I assume it's because we're going to be doing construction in those areas, like on the south of Ridgeway and that creek side, versus continuing or fixing the Hudson Road connection. I just have a question about that. Why is that not on our list in the next 3 or 4 years?
I can answer that. So the plan is developed as a whole from looking at where there may be some infills that are needed to incorporating some of those projects that we do know are on the horizon and getting those integrated in. For example, like the industrial park and then the business center south of Ridgeway. Those are projects that are currently being developed with the mind of providing multi modes of transit to get to those facilities and provide that. But with this plan, we also want to have some long-term goals when funding does become available that we can make those improvements. So Hudson Road would be a great example of, when funds become available or when that corridor is reestablished, that those improvements could be made at that time.
So it comes basically down to funding and the timing of other new construction projects, kind of a mix of that.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I also have a comment. First of all, I do commend the plan. I live right next to a bike trail pretty much, and we use it regularly. We love it. I appreciate the public comments about safety, especially on some of those shared roads. But I do have a concern leading out like to the south part of town where we really only have those recreational trails and really not much else. So if you think about a commuter cyclist, if they're on a public trail, they're typically going a lot faster than you would be if you're just moseying along with your dog on the big retractable leash, or you're with your kids on their Strider bike. And so for a commuter cyclist, it's really difficult to get to the south part of town for that reason. And so I'm not sure if there was any discussion about that, and I realize there are limitations based on what's out there already, but I'm wondering if that was even considered when you were thinking about, we really only have trails when you go out to that part of town rather than some of the other ways to get there. And was that discussed? Is that something that was a concern?
Yeah, it was certainly a part of our concern, and a lot of the, granted, a lot of the connections to the south part of town are on-street, shared lane type infrastructure. It's not always the case, but it was something that we discussed, and we tried to figure out what would be the best way to connect those areas. Unfortunately, we had the limitations of street widths and the type of streets that those were on that we were working within. So, little by little.
Any other comments?
So as far as the public comments went, when you did the surveys, were there any concerns with the current streets that are located in the center of town, like where the grid system is? Was there any suggestion to move from like 12th or 18th? Because I know there is it's like, well, you want the busier street so people are paying more attention, but then there's more cars. So obviously there's some kind of balance. Did you hear feedback from people about changing those at all?
Yes, and there was even a lot of feedback from the committee on that point as well. To kind of go back to one of the points that we discussed, one of the main issues along those major streets in terms of putting in other types of infrastructure like a bike lane, it would have taken away on-street parking in those areas, which would have to go to council and whatnot. And people along the corridor would have to be notified, and so there'd be a public process that's involved in that. And at least at this time, it didn't seem like there was the will to go through those public processes.
And will that process have to occur for Second Street?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
it will.
I think one of the other things to note on the bike plan is that the gridded street pattern in the central part of the city was called out as being bicycle and pedestrian friendly because of the grid. And there's so much distribution of traffic that most of those streets are pretty low volume as far as vehicular use. And so a lot of times they're really safe and comfortable for all types of riders to ride right on the street without any specific bike lanes or anything. So that's why it's called out on the plan map specifically as a safe place to bicycle.
So we would be encouraging riders or commuters to opt for the not shared streets then?
Not necessarily, but just noticing that that is a place for people to bike pretty easily along a lot of those streets in the gridded street network.
Okay, sounds good.
I think people are going to take 4th and 12th and 18th anyway because of the lack of cross-traffic stopping.
Yep.
Because otherwise, going to 18th or 17th, you're stuck with the predicament of having bikes stop at every single intersection, or else having 2 streets in a row that would interrupt the flow of College and Clay and all of those, Walnut and all, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
So I think that part of it makes sense.
Good comments. All right, anyone else? If I'm watching at home tonight, how do I get comments to you?
You can email me, chris.sevy, chris.sevy @cedarfalls.com.
All right, thank you, Chris.
Is this available on the city website too? It's for people to look at, correct?
Yes, and my email's on the website as well. As far as the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, I'm the liaison to the committee, or at least the main liaison to the committee. Matt is on that committee with me, or is a liaison to it. My contact info is on the website. So,
And are any of the areas that are planned currently as far as contingent to other development or planned now, is that schedule available online anywhere, or will it be at some point?
it's a good question. A lot of what's on this plan is contingent on developers. For instance, the Pinnacle Prairie Master Plan, as that gets built out, the trails that are intended by the plan that they had submitted to the city, are pending. So whenever that gets built out is going to determine when those trails go in. And there are a couple other instances like that, for instance, with the Aldrich Elementary connections as well.
So some of the plans are city-sponsored and will be done by city, and some are dependent upon the developer on that piece of land, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. With that, we'll move on to old business, and our first 3 items have been deferred at the request of the applicant, so we're going to skip over those and move to item 6 of the agenda, which is MU Master Plan Amendment for Pinnacle Prairie Development. I think, Tom, you're going to
I
this off?
am. You saw this at the last meeting. This is an amendment to the Pinnacle Prairie Business Center North for the parcels listed along Wild Ride Way. They're requesting to change the land use from multifamily mixed use to Western Home, since Western Homes has the property and they've got, currently under the master plan, they've got a land use category specific to the Western Homes community. They're proposing to build 19 two-family units on 2 lots, so they're going to have the north and the south side of Wild Ride Way. The latest master plan shows that the area up there and shows the hatched area is the multifamily, and then the area above it is gold, and it's the mixed use category. This is a little bit better viewing of it, and this shows how the homes will be laid out on the lot. It's again very similar to what's been built before. The retirement communities are allowed upon the site plan review and approval by the Planning Commission and City Council. And since they provided this site plan or this proposal, we would use this as also a site plan approval. This will go on to council. Here are some proposed elevations. They have a plan that's got what would be considered an extended garage with basically 2 cars. And then they have another plan that is out there that has a 2-car garage and then an additional car with that. I would be happy to answer any questions, and I think there is one of the applicant representatives are here.
All right, thank you, Tom. Anyone from the applicant that would like to speak to the item? Not required to? All right. Anyone from the public that would like to speak to this item? All right, with that, we'll bring it back to the commission.
I have to abstain on this item.
Okay?
Mr.
Commissioner-
Chair, I also need to abstain from this item.
All right, we have a couple of,
And I failed to mention, but the staff recommends approval of the change.
okay.
Well, I think it's a much needed addition as we're all getting older and need another place to live. I like the 3 stall. Greg would love that. Anyway, I would recommend approval.
I'd second that.
All right, we have a motion, a second. Any further discussion on the item? All right, Karen, roll call vote.
Chrisman?
Aye.
Hartley?
Aye.
Oh, sorry.
Abstain, yeah.
Abstain. All right. Larson?
Aye.
Leeper?
Aye.
Moser?
Aye.
Saul?
Aye.
All right, so that item will move on to city council. Thank you. With that, we're going to new business, and we have a zoning text amendment to add a requirement for P and Z review of site plans in the CDDT district. Karen, you're kicking this off?
Okay. Just a little background about this. I know not all of you were on the commission when you went over the new code and the ideas about this. I know it was discussed quite a bit by the commission about what the role of the Planning and Zoning Commission would be under the new code. I think there had been some concerns about under the CBD overlay that almost everything was coming through the commission and the city council, you know, every small project, a lot of signs and those kind of things. So I think there was some frustration about that. So I know that you discussed options when we discussed, and the idea with the new code was there's a lot more clear and objective standards put into the code. So there was less reason to have an extra review by the Planning and Zoning Commission, because before there were a lot of discretionary standards, as you know, like for example, in the Central Business District, there wasn't a specific like height limit. And so a lot of things that came through the commission, there was a lot of debate about, you know, how tall the building should be for where it's located. So there was much more discretion in the previous code. This gives you a little bit, this little chart here does show you the previous zoning. The area of the Central Business District overlay did require P&Z and council review, but all of the other areas in the downtown character district, not all of that was covered by the CBD overlay. So a lot of the neighborhood areas were zoned R3 and R4. There was some C1 and C2, even some manufacturing, some industrial area. None of those areas required Planning and Zoning Commission review of any development plans in those areas. So with the new code, this kind of shows that, you know, it's other than for the CBD overlay, basically the Planning and Zoning Commission did require review under previous code. The other thing to note, I think this was a slide that was provided to the council, just a little bit, I think a lot of concern about what is the role of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and you sitting on the Planning and Zoning Commission know what your role is, but this is straight from the city code. It's really your role is to plan for the future growth of the city, the comprehensive planning. So you get a lot of comp plan amendments and things like the bike plan coming through you, and making recommendations on legislative matters, so rezonings, major changes to the code, such as the new downtown code, and then making recommendations on new subdivisions of land, extensions of streets, and proposals for parks. All come before the Planning and Zoning Commission for recommendation. So, interestingly enough, the review of site plans is not one of the official duties listed for the Planning and Zoning Commission in the city code. However, as time has gone on and new zones have been added, some overlay zones, some of those do require Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council review. For example, you've seen a number of site plans for the Highway 1 district. So that Greenbelt overlay district requires P&Z and council review. So that's why some of those site plans are coming to the commission for some of those overlay zones, the newer zones, the mixed use zone, for example, the RP zones, and for the downtown. So that's just a little bit of background on the role of the Planning and Zoning Commission up to this point. So the petition from City Council was to have the commission reconsider whether to bring the Planning and Zoning Commission back in for a formal role in site plan review for new projects in the downtown character district. So staff just did some brainstorming on some possible ideas here, but there might be some other ideas that you have out there. So this is not an exhaustive list of ideas. But I just wanted to go down through each one of these. These are kind of listed in order of least involvement to most involvement. Of course, the first option is just to maintain what the code is right now, which is just administrative review by staff with no P&Z review. Number two is an idea about bringing a monthly report to the Planning and Zoning Commission on any development that has been proposed in the downtown character district, so that you have a kind of a running list of how things are going, maybe for the next year or so, just to see how the code is working. And it's an opportunity for people to express concerns, or even for staff to say, hey, this doesn't, maybe we need to tweak this, or so it's a good check back in with the commission on how the code's working. But that wouldn't be like a formal, administrative review by the commission, that idea. Number three would be to add a requirement to the code to require P&Z a review of new buildings proposed in the area, the Urban General 2, and the storefront areas. Those are the areas that were formerly, a lot of that area was in what was previously the CBD overlay. So the main downtown areas, the mixed use areas, the higher density areas of the character district, to have those, any new buildings proposed in that area brought to the Planning and Zoning Commission for review and approval by the commission. And number four would be to require all new buildings in the entire character district. That would include both the downtown area, the urban general areas, and the neighborhood areas, to the commission for review, any new buildings. And then number five, require all site plans to be reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then moving on to the City Council for approval, as was done previously in the CBD overlay. So, and then of course, any ideas that you might want to discuss. So really this is just bringing it to you for a general discussion at this point, not having a lot of direct recommendation from the City Council, but wanting you to discuss this in general.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Is anyone from the public that would like to speak to this item? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission for comments.
Well, I think one of the primary objectives of the new zoning ordinance was to provide a clear set of rules and make it easier for developers, and to potentially remove an often unnecessary step from the process, which as much as it pains me as us in a lot of instances. So having those clear-cut rules are beneficial to a lot of people, ultimately the citizens and business owners and developers. Now, ultimately, it is a big experiment, and I was going to actually suggest before we got into the presentation, option 2, potentially just to make sure that there's some kind of a review since this is sort of an experiment, and we can see what's going on and make sure that more than anything, as far as I'm concerned, that nothing's dying on the vine, and prompting reconsideration at some point. So I really like the idea of option 2, where we get kind of a summary of some kind and we review after a specified period of time.
I would second that, and I would also say that I do feel a little bit discouraged by how many things have been coming back from the council. That I know that, I mean, while I wasn't here, that many of you have put so much work into, and so I'm not sure that adding another thing for us to approve is a great idea if those things that we've already worked so hard on are just going to come back to us again anyway. So I do think I like the idea of staying in the loop, knowing what's happening and seeing those things and checking in on the work that we've already done, but I don't think that we need to review every single site plan.
A couple thoughts I had along the ways we went through this whole process is, I mean, what Kyle stated is, you know, what the new zoning and process is a lot more efficient, and it's a lot less subjective, so it's easier to, you know, check things through, and so that's really good for the development process and all that type of thing. The only thing I think that our role and what happened in planning and zoning is a chance for others to comment on these things that, you know, and so, you know, it's not going to happen in that zone if we follow it strictly. And so there's always a question, is there some other way that, you know, because we're the forum where there's a chance for public input, you know, on these things. And I guess the other thing is I always kind of felt like the planning and zoning's job is a little bit of a kind of a check on the staff. Not that the staff's doing anything wrong, but, you know, developer and staff don't necessarily agree on something, and, you know, sometimes then it comes to the planning and zoning, and then you know, that's kind of the public input to, you know, recommend a decision on how to proceed based on that. So that was the one part that was always a little worrisome in the new approach, that we maybe were losing, you know, that ability a little bit. But, you know, to Kyle's comment, it's kind of a big experiment, and we don't know if that is a reality or not, in how it'll actually, you know, occur going forward. So, but that was the one piece that, you know, is a little up in the air in my mind on how that all really functions in the end. So
I agree with everyone's comments so far. It's a tough place to be a little bit. This may be a dumb idea, but I like kind of the version of option 2. I'm wondering if is there a mechanism that if a majority of the Planning and Zoning Commission decided to pull an item in for formal review, that could work? Or is there something like that? That if we had a majority of the commission that said, hey, this needs to come through us, does that make sense or not, Karen? You can think on it too. I know I didn't throw this at you last
So
week.
it work
that would
almost like a
involve the,
referral? It'd work like a referral at council,
Yeah,
basically?
or something. I was
Yeah.
going to say, my position on it, I understand the efficiency of what we've done, changing it, but more than taking us out of it, it takes the public's view out of it. And it would be, you know, I don't want to weight it down again and have every project run through, but it'd be nice to have a overview, you know, monthly, hey, these are the things, and as a, you know, a commission, we could say, hey, we need to look at item B of a list of whatever. But it gives the, you know, if there was a presentation monthly from staff of these are the projects that are going through that don't go through P&Z anymore, and then if one of them are flagged to be brought up, it gives us a chance to see it, but more than anything, it gives the public a chance to see it, that they're not gonna see if it doesn't go through P&C.
Well, and we
think
have
that's an
seen that
excellent
in the
idea.
past, where we've had discussion on a couple of things, even in the last year, where public comment made a difference on what was going to happen moving forward.
So what about compromising and doing number 3? Because I think mainly those come on new projects, new buildings. So if we looked at number 3 and just those in the urban general 2 and storefront, I don't think we need to look at everything in the CBD zone because those are some residential and whatever, but it seems to me that the biggest issues come with the bigger, taller, new things,
Right.
you know?
It's true.
Well, my concern was about stuff getting lost or dying on the vine potentially, and so I think that affects all areas since, like I said earlier, this is an experiment. I think the idea of being able to pull an item, to bring it into this arena is an excellent one. I think there was a motion earlier that got seconded, but I didn't actually make a motion.
I don't think it was a formal
It
second.
wasn't a formal
It
second.
wasn't?
I was just saying, I second what you say.
I just thought while I had the microphone, I'd clarify that.
Yep.
Because I would revise it now.
So if we were going to add something to the zoning ordinance, there needs to be some real specific trigger.
Yeah.
So, I think to provide some certainty for the property owners, not having any idea, at what point in time could somebody, if you've gotten all the way down the path to getting something reviewed and then somebody decides, hey, 3 months into it, hey, we want to review it. So there needs to be some clear path. So if we want to add the Planning and Zoning Commission back in for a review, I think we need to be really clear when that happens. Does it happen right when these are the specific projects that
it would have to
reviewed
happen,
by
I
the
think.
commission? Or if it's referred to the commission, it could be something like, the trigger could be, say, even the staff could say, okay, or maybe there's a disagreement or something like that on some standard, and we could say, well, let's refer that to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Or it could be we give a period of time where it could be referred by somebody else, for example, in the community could say, hey, because if there's be something that could, somebody finds out and said, okay, we want to refer that to the Planning and Zoning Commission. But I think there needs to be some time limit, because otherwise people would never know when somebody might say, hey, wait a minute, 3 months down the line. So I think whatever we decide here, you decide that it just needs to be real clear so we can put something into the code that's clear.
Well, I think
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I think that idea about, maybe the planning and zoning asking for specific projects, we'd almost have to have a process where you report every project that comes in, like, right away. So it comes to the commission, and then we'd have to make a decision if, that's one we'd like to look at,
So to me, that could be very arbitrary and could really cause trouble. Because people would say, well, why is this project being looked at and not that one? I don't feel that that's the right way to go.
I think that's what Karen's saying, in terms, there needs to be some triggers.
Yeah, but what would the trigger be? I mean, that's the question.
So, but your trigger, when you're suggesting like item 3, that's a very specific.
Right.
Here's the criteria, they meet this criteria, then they come to planning and zoning
Right.
review.
I mean, one thing to keep in mind is that the standards written in the code, the things that had a lot of debate before were things that were very, a little bit vague in the code.
Right.
So there was a lot of discussion about what does that mean? How is it compatible with adjacent buildings?
Right.
All that language is now out of the code. There's nothing, there's a height limit downtown of 4 stories. It can't be any taller than that. So it can't, so I think one of the, and you just discussed this before, was one of the concerns, and I think one of the challenges for the commission then would be what happens if somebody brings a project, a new building forward through the commission, it's required to be reviewed by you, but it's checked all the boxes, and met all the code requirements, but somebody comes to the meeting and doesn't like the building. How, you're basically taking the role of an administrative approval. you basically have to approve a building that meets the standards. It puts you in a little bit difficult position, say if there's differences of opinion of liking the building or not liking the building. So that's another thing for you to think about is what, will this be challenging for you folks to, if the public doesn't like something, but yet it meets all the standards.
Well, I move to defer this to the next meeting, and maybe that'll give staff a little bit of time to maybe articulate some thoughts and/or options as it pertains to these couple of things we've been discussing, and then we commissioners can do the same thing.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not looking for a formal motion tonight. We're just
No,
giving
but we would
direction.
like,
Is that-
if you want us to bring, these were the ideas, and these are things that we could pretty clearly and easily put into the code, depending on how you want to go. The idea that you were talking about of referring something, that's a little bit more challenging, so we'd need to think about what that trigger would be. So I'd like to know if the commission wants to go that direction, so we would have to spend some time really thinking about that. If you want to choose one of these options, I think these are a little more clear cut.
I'm tending towards, after thinking about it a little bit more and Leon's comment about, hey, the types of buildings that are most likely to be issues and, kind of going generally towards that item 3 direction. That does seem like that might hit the ones that we would be most interested in looking at. And then that would be a way to maybe have a clear criteria for, so when a project comes in, you can tell them right away, okay, here's the process you have to go through to review on those.
Are you suggesting 2 and 3 or just 3, Marty? 2 was just the informational.
Well, I think 2 would be a good idea, at least for initially, just because, how else are we going to know how it's a pretty opaque process, Otherwise, that would be nice to have that just kind of informational purposes, just so we know how things are going, going forward. But yeah, something in that 2 and 3 or,
Let's separate those. Is everyone in general agreement that 2 would be a version of 2 would be a good thing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, definitely.
What
I
about-
agree that 3 as well,
And 3?
for a period of time at least, just as potentially both, just as a means of sort of checking our work.
I agree. I think I expressed pretty strongly some concerns about when we were going through this process early about, you can follow all the rules and do something really dumb. And you can not follow the rules and do something really good. And to me, I struggle with that a little bit still. And I'm not sure what the answer is. I don't want to give ambiguity. But at the same time, I don't know if staff has the ability to pull a project and bring it before the commission or what that looks like. But for me, I know it's messy, but I would prefer some kind of mechanism for that personally.
And I also think that there is, you want to provide some kind of structure so that people they're able to reference that and then have that come back to us. And, if they say, this is really causing a lot of issues for us. And obviously we always have public comment. So, if you're working on a project, I would assume those people know what we do as a commission and they could still come and talk to us in that public comment. And then maybe that affects our process. But Karen, if we change what it says now, where is the next opportunity to change that if we decide we want to go a different direction?
Well, any kind of legislative change, of course, no code is perfect. So just like we bring code amendments to you for a lot of different things, if things aren't working right and we think it's a good idea to make a change, that would be a legislative change that would be a code amendment. So this itself would be, at least anything beyond 1 or 2 would be a change to the code. So we would bring back some specific language to change the process. And in the future, if you wanted to change it back, or if it wasn't working, or even if there were provisions, I mean, I would anticipate that the staff, we would be noticing things that aren't working quite right. So we would like to have the opportunity. I mean, our goal is to help people, be able to develop properties and build out the vision for downtown. So we don't want things to be a pinch point. So if there's something that we feel like is not working quite right, hopefully we're bringing it back and saying we need to tweak this. So I think, does that help answer the question?
Definitely.
There's always opportunities to change the code if things aren't working quite right.
Yeah, definitely.
And that can be initiated by staff or any one commissioner? Or do we need to specify like a review period or something like that?
Well, I mean, we have, just like the daycare use, it was brought to our attention, and then we talked with them and said, well, a good option would be just to, change the code, because we didn't see a big problem throughout the industrial areas to allow daycare uses, for example. So that was just initiated by something prompted from us, so we initiated that code amendment. So it could really be initiated by a lot of different ways. Somebody could, petition for a change, a private citizen, or it could come from staff. It could come from any direction, just like council is petitioning the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider a change now.
Right. And I'm just clarifying that we as commissioners have the ability to do that?
I think anybody could bring up an item for
Okay.
discussion, sure.
All right.
And we just need to schedule it for, on the agenda.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Under item 2, just a clarification, which is, a summary of these projects coming through. To Marty's point, I think it's worded that it comes to the commission. Is there a mechanism or means that the public sees these items as well, to address Marty's concern about seeing these projects that are coming through, and the transparency that our current process has right now? Is there a means for the public to see those projects as we are? So they might comment in the public section.
Well, including them in the packet.
I was going to say, would it be in the packet?
So it would be on the agenda for the
Yeah.
Planning and Zoning Commission, and we just have a regular scheduled item for updates to the commission on downtown
Yep,
projects,
right.
so.
Right.
That makes sense.
Okay, great. Any other discussion on this item? Good discussion tonight. Okay, with that, any other commission updates?
I don't have anything else tonight.
All right, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, have a good night, everyone.